I hope that you will share with us some questions, preferably not comments, for the women who are here with us tonight. The organizers of this event have been incredible. And so I have some questions to start with. And if you don't mind, we'll jump in, okay? So most, if not all, congregational rabbis, to the points that you were making, are on call for life cycle events for members of their congregations. How do you do that? How do you make that work? And part of it's around your family, but also around yourselves and your own sanity. Can you tell us? Anyone goes.
Well, there's the blessing, certainly, of a partner who's flexible. As your kids get older, there's the blessing of your kids being flexible as well. But I would say, at least for me, when I think about my own personal time or what I need for myself with regard to being on call, I make sure I schedule that time for myself. Sometimes at hours other people might not do it, but to make sure that I give myself that time. So for example, I work out with a trainer 3 days a week, but I do it at 6:30 in the morning because no one's really gonna call. Sometimes they might, but nobody's gonna really call me at 6:30 in the morning. So you learn to work through those time periods and make that time for yourself.
I sometimes say that Temple Emmanuel is a little bit of a boutique congregation, that we are small by choice. I get texts sometimes at 10 o'clock at night. But I also feel as much as I give, the congregation is very giving back to my family. We just came back from being away for almost 2 weeks. I think I had one email. And the congregation is very much encouraging, you go away. And like you said, Rabbi Rosenberg, you know, like I'll run 20 miles when I'm in training for a marathon. Nancy, that'll be soon, be for your marathon. And so if I run 20, 22 miles, I check the phone after every 7 miles or so. But I believe that a healthy congregation wants their clergy to be healthy. So I feel like it's a partnership.
Anything else?
Well, I would say that, it's a challenge to balance all of that. And I would say that I do have moments of heartbreak when I know that my children would rather have me with them. But I will say that also gets balanced when I overheard my daughter once telling a friend of hers, my mommy cannot come to this, but she's helping someone who needs help more than I do right now. So I think just sort of having a family who can be understanding and proud that they loan me out to be with other people is really gratifying in that way too. But it's hard sometimes, but it's not. It's worth it, I guess, is what I would say.
So Susan, I saw you raise your kids, and lots of people in this room have lots of different visions of you, but mine was watching you reach deep into the back of the minivan and pull out the Torah, because you were delivering it and carrying it.
Right.
How'd you do it?
I had tricks, mostly. Of course, Jim and I really did it together, but I knew that there would be a lot of times that I wouldn't be able to be there because I really did want to be with my community. I wanted to serve. When people needed me, I wanted to be there. So I did things like in the middle of the day, because I was, out most nights, but in the middle of the day, I would make sure that I would drive carpool. So there was my kids always had the illusion that I was there. And when you drive carpool, they forget. I don't know, it's like they don't think you're listening or something, or they, and so I always kind of they always kind of knew that, there were certain times they could count on me being there. And the other thing is, we had, children that had some health problems, and the community was very supportive of that. And when my kids were sick and we needed to be there, you know, they expected me to be with my kids. And so, you know, I worked hard, and I did everything that I could, because I knew that there would be times that I couldn't be there. And I think that for our children, they knew when they needed us, they could count on us. And so even though it wasn't all the time, and there were times that we missed, you know, like Andrea said, when they needed us, they could count on us being there. And as you said, we schlepped them around a lot. They came with us a lot too. You know, they really did. So, you know, you juggle and you balance and you explain, and like, you know, you tell them why you're not there too. And you know, these past weeks, you know, these past months actually, my kids are, now I have to call in and tell them that I'm home from Ferguson and I'm safe, you know, and they're not calling me now, I'm calling them and telling them, "Are you home, Mom?" "Yeah, I'm home, I'm fine," you know. So all those years I did that with them, so, you know.
My children are still very young. My son just turned 6. My daughter is 2. And so far we've been lucky. They don't have a lot of soccer games or things that they need for us to be at. But for me, it's really because I'm very lucky to have my extended family here. My sister and my mother and my grandmother who are here tonight. They have spent a lot of time helping raise my children. And it's because of them that I can do this job. And also the fact that since my husband is the other rabbi at the temple, when one of us says, "No, you know, I do have to be at dinner tonight, I do have to be at soccer," then the other one takes on the rabbinic duty. And so far the congregation has been incredibly understanding that sometimes they get one of us and sometimes they get the other, and they're in good hands regardless, and so are our children.
Ken, Nathan, do you have something to add?
Well, I mentioned my husband being so supportive, and I guess I also have an extended family here, and I couldn't do this without my dad, who schleps my children around, and my mother-in-law, who schleps my children around, and, you know, sisters-in-law and aunts, and it really does make an enormous difference. But it's not all roses all the time. You know, when I come home, my son always asks me, "Are you staying? Are you staying?" Yeah? So I had a conversation with Rabbi Talvi, and she said, "My kids all turned out great." Which was
And they
great,
did,
because I often
actually.
wonder what kind of therapy my children are going to be in a few years. But luckily we do have lots of support here, and the congregants are also very supportive.
Rory, you don't have an extended family here.
No, I don't, which is a challenge sometimes. But I'm also very blessed to have a very supportive partner, and one who is lucky enough to be in a very flexible job. So he works remotely for a Jewish new media organization based in California, which he did intentionally when he knew that I was going to go on the job market. And so I don't think that there's anyone prouder of what I'm doing than he is. Which has just been great for me. He really feels like that's part of his contribution, is being able to sometimes be the one who's putting the kids to sleep so I could be teaching a class or meeting with people. I have very young children, so also not really soccer games and things like that, but my 3.5-year-old daughter is so proud of the work that I do. And that's also such an inspiration. We're in a congregation that really embraces family, and so they get to come with me, and nobody gives us guilt if they make a little bit of noise during services or things like that, or sometimes they'll come up when I'm giving the sermon, and that's okay too. And there's such a look of pride on my daughter's face when she'll say, "You're going to go up and you're going to give the sermon because you're the Mahara." And that just makes it all worth it. And so I know that for as much as there's those times that I'm missing, and that's really hard for me, I also know that she's growing up knowing all the possibilities that she has in her life.
This is from the audience, and it is for each one of you. If you were the rabbi at the Paris synagogue, would you have closed?
You know, I thought a lot about that Friday night as we sat in our shul, and we had the luxury of being together and not being afraid. And I don't know what I would have done because I'm not there. And thank God I don't know what it feels like to be that afraid, to be openly Jewish, to be scared that someone would attack my synagogue. I can barely imagine that. I really can't. And I lived for 2 years in Tunisia between college and rabbinical school, and it wasn't always the friendliest of places in Tunis. It was when the PLO was moving in, and I do remember feeling, going to the synagogue and being very careful, but I don't think that I can even begin to imagine what the people in that synagogue the decision that they had to make that night. And I so respect what they did because nobody was hurt that night. Right. Maybe they saved lives that night, and that 3 million people gathered in support not only of the people of Paris, but of the Jewish community. Next day we should be saying, Je suis juif, I wish the whole world was saying, Je suis juif. But the fact that they were that scared, I imagine they did what they had to do.
When I was interviewed to become the senior rabbi of Temple Israel, one of the questions that they asked me was, if your congregation received a bomb threat on Rosh Hashanah, what would you do? And which was a terrible question, so for those of you who are on my committee. But what I said, at least what I remember saying was that if, God forbid, that were to happen, that one of the things that I felt so lucky about being in this community is that even though, let's be honest, even though a lot of the times our congregations, we are competitors, that this would be one of those times where I know that I could go to my colleagues or I could come to the Federation and I could say, we need somewhere to pray. And that I know in a heartbeat that any one of my colleagues in any Jewish institution would say, if Temple Israel is in trouble, we will open our doors to you. And this is the same conversation that we had actually just, I guess, a month or two ago with Andrew Rayfeld when we were trying to decide what might happen, when we were wondering what kind of riots there might be after Ferguson. And we came together as a group of rabbis to say, what can we do for our colleagues in the congregations in this area that may be at risk, and how can we open our doors to them? And so, well, I'm not sure what I would have done if I was in France. What I can certainly say is that here I feel very confident that when we do have these moments, or if we ever have these moments, that we are scared that there are enough of us in this community that we could turn to each other and have the support that we would need to feel safe and to be able to worship and be together as Jews anytime we like.
Hello. No, I'll just echo, right. It's an impossible question to answer in the sense that we feel deeply connected to the Jews of France right now and to any person of any faith who is feeling like it's not okay to be who they are simply because of the way they practice or the way they believe. I think that, obviously being able to be together as a community in the aftermath and the wake of such a tragedy would be of great comfort, but that doesn't trump the safety. And so if one life can be saved, it is if we are saving the entire world. And that mitzvah trumps all others, including being together in observance of Shabbat. And it doesn't alter the sense of identity that people have of who they are. And, I think it is right to think that we don't know in how many lives, perhaps we don't know who could have been saved on their way to shul or on their way home in that particular instance.
Does anybody want to add? Do you want to? Okay, so on a different note, and I'm going to read this just the way it was written. What are some of the differences between a rabbi and a Mahara? And for that matter, besides song leading, what is the difference between a cantor and a rabbi? Clearly, we know it was directed to the two of you. So will you take this?
I have to tell you, when people ask me the difference between a rabbi and a maharat, it's much better when Rabbi Talvi answers it than she can say things that I can't say. If you don't mind if I just jump in. In terms of, there's really no difference in the role that I have within the congregation as a maharat to the rabbi, and I do work side by side with a rabbi, with Rabbi Chaim Schaffner. The only differences between the roles that we take on really have to do with the same differences that exist in an Orthodox congregation between any man and any woman within the congregation. So to the extent that we sit on separate sides of the mechitza, because we do have men and women sitting separately within the congregation. I don't lead prayers. The rabbi doesn't always lead the prayers either, but we don't have women who are leading prayers for the entire congregation. And I don't count towards the prayer quorum, towards the minyan, because we count 10 adult male Jews for the minyan. But none of those are inherent to, all of those are things that I would be true anyway as a lay leader. And so to the extent of within that, what I'm able to do as the maharat in the congregation, really we split most of the other responsibilities other than where our strengths are, or when sometimes there's a person who feels more of a connection to one of us than the other. So we switch off every week of who gives the sermon. We both teach classes. We both offer pastoral counseling. We both do fundraising. We're both sometimes writing grant proposals and making sure that light bulbs get changed, and all the other things that take place. So, and that's something that I'm also really grateful for. That he really sees the role as a role of colleagues. That he has really allowed me to take on all of those possibilities, and the congregation also really has. So, the role of a maharat in training is really parallel to the role of a rabbi. As was said in the introduction, there's only 5 of us, so we're all kind of making it up as we go along in our individual congregations. And I'm really blessed to be in a place where my role is really one that's side by side with the rabbi.
Okay. Well, I guess it's the difference between a rabbi and a cantor was the question. And well, the rabbi is immersed in texts and Jewish law, and while there's a lot of crossover, my area is really the sacred sounds and the intricacies of the musical aspects of our liturgy. So the rabbi kind of reaches people through the heart, but also through the intellect. And I reach people through the heart, but also through the guts. Because there is an immediate reaction, right, when you have something musical. And I like to create that opportunity for a pathway into Judaism, not necessarily through the study of the text, but through the study of learning the skills for the home ritual and for the skills to participate in the ritual life of the synagogue. And my role is not to be the best, at least in my opinion, is not to be the best musician in the shul. It's not even to be the best singer in the shul, but it's to create opportunities for people through music, to be a part of the community.
Rabbi Talvi, do you want to say something about the difference between the maharat and the rabbi?
I think they did a great job.
Okay. If you could add, that would be good.
Right, but the maharat, in my heart, she's a rabbi. and she could be my rabbi. And for, I mean, if you've ever heard Sharon sing, and you've heard her at a funeral, I mean, she knows, she prays in a way that draws us all in. She uses her voice and her heart and her soul in ways that, help us all heal and feel. So, thank you.
Rabbi Rosenberg, we're going to start on your end. Would you describe yourself as a feminist?
Oh, gosh. Oy. So I will tell you that I started off college as a women's studies major. And I would have said once upon a time, fervently yes. And then, although I wouldn't say that I'm not a feminist, but I also was, and I knew when I was in that first year of college that I also had these dreams of being the woman who was going to have it all, the career, the soccer mom, the Volvo, the kids in the back seat, everything. And I had a young woman say to me, you can't be a feminist and have that. But she also told me, and I remember it so well, she said to me, you can't be a feminist until you know how to love a woman. And I looked at her and I said, oh, okay. And I didn't think the two had anything to do with each other, but I also, at the time, was in all these classes, and I will say, though I graduated from Boston University, I went to Wheaton College in Massachusetts, not the one in Illinois, and it had just gone co-ed. And so I had wanted to go to an all-women's school, and my mother said no. She was a graduate of Smith and wouldn't let me go to a women's school. But we were at a time where there was a lot of tension on campus, and there were a lot of angry women, and it didn't work for me. And so actually I ran far away from women's studies after that. So would I call myself a feminist? Yes. But not to the extent that it's over and above anything else. I don't know if a term equalist would be better. I feel very strongly about strong, powerful women, but at the same way I feel about strong, powerful men who also appreciate strong, powerful women, and that there doesn't need to be an either or. So that is probably the best way that I could describe how I'm a feminist, although in rabbinical school somebody at some point I think said, you're like a lipstick feminist, you're very girly, but also strong. These terms keep coming, they're bizarre terms that we have. Rory.
A few years ago, I was speaking on a panel for an organization called the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. And somebody asked the panel this very same question. And it was all young women leaders, and everyone basically said in some form or another, we're feminists, but the term has become really loaded, and to use the term sometimes stops a conversation, so it's easier to avoid the term. And there was a woman in the audience who jumped out of her seat and yelled that we had set back the women's rights movement 40 years, which was probably one of the biggest contributions to the Jewish community that I had made. It's really like 40 years in 1 minute. It's also, and that's really, to a certain extent, I think everything that Rabbi Rosenberg said is really true and powerful. And I had mentioned in my remarks earlier that I really grapple with being in a position that I know people somehow find threatening. And somehow within that narrative has come about this idea of this feminist agenda. I'm not even really sure what the feminist agenda is. I'm apparently not on the mailing list, but maybe you are, I don't know. But in this idea that somehow, and it's fascinating to me because I'm in a community where people aren't really opposed to the idea of women's learning. They're not necessarily opposed to the idea of women taking on leadership roles. We're very comfortable with women being the heads of departments in universities or arguing before a Supreme Court or whatever it might be. And yet somehow I'm part of this feminist agenda because within Judaism I'm corrupting things. So I'm a feminist also to the extent that I think women should have equal rights, equal access within Judaism. We should be paid the same amount that men do. We should be able to do all of the same things, and I don't see it as different because I'm a woman, as other people have mentioned. My job is different because I'm different than everybody else, not inherently because I'm female. And yet, somehow if I answer this question, I set back women's rights 40 years, so I'll leave it at that.
I would say yes, absolutely. And maybe to the extent that I really like Rabbi Rosenberg's equalist. I really like that. But to say that I'm not a feminist would certainly not be true. And I absolutely owe a huge debt of gratitude to all of those generations of angry women who came before me. So a big thank you to them so that I don't actually have to be angry, so that I can be who I am, so I can be as feminine as I want to be and still be out in the world and working, but also have the choice of being home if I want to, but also that my husband should be able to have that choice as well. So yes.
If being a feminist means equal opportunities for both genders, then yes. However, I grew up in a very traditional household. And when I was in high school, I was the first class with 2 other women who refused to take home economics. So I don't know how to cook and I don't know how to sew. We had macaroni and cheese out of a box tonight that my husband made. And I took shop class. I took metal and woodworking. And, did I do that because I was a feminist, or was I just rebelling because I was a 14 or 15-year-old? I'm not really sure. I remember never having problems with language, with gender language, until I was in a senior seminar in philosophy class. And a girl named Caroline, who looked very progressive and very with it, we're reading, and all of a sudden she goes, "Stop. I cannot read another word. This is a barrier." And she was talking about male language. And at the time, it didn't bother me. Now I don't use gender language. But I think how I define being a feminist is someone who is comfortable in one's own skin. And I think that when we're comfortable with who we are and the choices that we're making, then in fact we're a feminist. There are times when I've worked full time, there's times when I'm not, but I've been comfortable with my choices. And I think that's probably more important than a title.
I'm proud to say I'm a feminist. Whatever it means. I just feel, I grew up listening to Free to Be You and Me on the white portable record player turntable, all by myself in the guest bedroom with the green shag carpet, sort of daydreaming about, why William can have a doll, and and Marlo Thomas was my hero, and all of those things. And that's an important part of who I am. Those songs that I can not sing beautifully for you, but can know every word. I think the comment at the beginning that who would have thought that, all of us would be able to be here today, and so many more female clergy who are in the community and around the world, and it's amazing. And I think sometimes we get confused by how far we come doesn't mean that that's the end. There are still a lot of fights worth fighting, and to me, being a feminist means looking for the humanity, the beauty, the B'Tselem Elohim, the goodness and the respect that each person, regardless of gender, is deserving of, and also being very proud of the contributions that my gender makes. And I think that women, not just in the field of clergy, but I think that women working in all fields that were traditionally only open to men, have broken open lots of not barriers, but I think it, one of the most beautiful things to me is that it allows men to look at themselves differently as well. the rabbis that I grew up, looking up to, who were men, would have never dared to talk about in their contracts what paternity leave means and why it's important, and why it's important for a man to model being at home with his family. Women did that for men, and we should be proud of that, in my opinion.
So I also grew up listening to Free to Be You and Me, and I still have it in the car, in fact, and I listen to it all the time. And I also took a lot of feminist studies classes in college, and definitely would have referred to myself as a feminist. And then when I was 22, a good friend of mine, and a friend of Amy's as well, who I had spent my whole girlhood with, came out as being transgender. And that just completely changed my life, because the first time I realized that being a woman and a man really had nothing to do with it, that there were so many different issues that I was not even aware of. And so, when I talk to my friend Dylan now, we often talk about the fact that really gender does not have so much to do with who we are anymore. Or maybe it has everything to do with who we are, but I can't define who I am because I'm a woman, because I know that even what it means to be a woman or to be a feminist or to be a man, that those things are constantly changing. And so it simply is just not a focus of who I am anymore. And I just think that I'm very lucky to be in this position where I have this wonderful job, and I can be a woman, and my husband can be a man and have the same job. And as my friend Dylan said, when I found out that I was pregnant with a girl, and I said to him, I'm really nervous. I don't know if I'm going to be a good mom for a girl. And he said, well, maybe she'll turn out to be a boy. and I just thought, all right, well, then that's the end of the discussion. So. You were at that wedding, actually.
I was. I'm a proud militant feminist, and I think we have a long way to go, and I think for me what it means to be a feminist is to not forget, our job is to move the margins to the middle, as Dalia Fadila said, an Israeli Arab woman who came to this community, because to be a feminist means you don't leave anybody behind. And, we have, trafficking in this community. We have young women who are property still. We have women across the world still being stoned, we have a long way to go. And for me, to be a feminist and is to use my privilege to make sure that I work for the liberation of all women. And my daughters would say that we are post-feminists today, and I wish that was true, but I think we have a long way to go. For a time when we really do see. My first words were, I didn't want to be a token in a patriarchal, tradition. And I still feel like we have a lot of paradigms to shift before we change the world for all people. And I think the liberation of women, and I think the Jewish mystical tradition teaches this in its core. The liberation of women is what's going to take for the liberation of all. And I hope it comes soon.
So I just got the sign that there are 2 minutes remaining. And I'd like to use those 2 minutes to show our appreciation to these women who have been so generous with their time. You see, usually you're the one standing.
Thank you.
This is an amazing evening. And really, the people who put it together, and do me a favor, stop leaving. Because this is important. And it's important to be present, and it's important to say thank you. And the people you should thank are the co-chairs of Women's Philanthropy, Vicki Singer and Sherry Schumann. They're here to make some closing remarks.
First of all, thank you so much to our esteemed rabbis who participated tonight. We learned so much about each one of you. St. Louis is so lucky to have you. Yes. And thank you, Ellen, for being a part of this very special event and for doing such a fantastic job moderating our program this evening. Okay. Thank you, Barbara, for doing a wonderful job as our chair of the event, and also to our committee. Really, thank you, thank you. And also, most of all, thanks to all of you here. Everyone here has made history tonight. And we just also want to thank our wonderful sponsors and everyone who has made a tribute to the Jewish Federation of St. Louis in honor of our St. Louis women's clergy. If you would still like to make a tribute, there are envelopes on the way out. We hope you've had a chance to look at the Midwestern wall, which is right over there on your way in. It's in the back of the room. Everyone who has made a tribute has their name on the wall. We're so proud to be a part of this amazing community. And I'll hand it over to my co-chair, Sherry. Thank you.
The Jewish Federation of St. Louis is proud to be the foundation of the community, bringing community together and preserving and enhancing Jewish life in St. Louis, in Israel, and around the world. We are here to ensure our community's Jewish future through fostering Jewish identity, serving as a safety net for the vulnerable, ensuring a safe Jewish world, and creating a vibrant Jewish community. Through the community's support, we are so thrilled to make these goals a reality. We're so glad you came tonight. We, the organizers, are the women of Women's Philanthropy. Like our clergy, we are all denominations and with a varied background. Our common goal is to enhance our Jewish life. We have many opportunities for involvement, from once-a-year participation in our signature shower to our ongoing community service opportunities and great programs like the one you've experienced tonight. Our credo is connecting community, inspiring social good. Come connect with us and help make a difference in our Jewish community. We want to thank the Jay and Lynn Whittles for sponsoring us, and we hope to see you again in another program soon.